The blueprints were still warm from the printer when detectives found them. Architectural drawings of a house, meticulously detailed, with one room circled in red ink. But these weren't plans for construction, they were plans for murder. And the woman whose bedroom had been marked like a target on a map had been dead for 3 days. Kelly Coppola seemed to have it all. At 34 years old, she was a successful real estate attorney in Boca Raton, Florida, known for her sharp mind and even sharper closing statements. She'd built a thriving practice from the ground up, specializing in commercial property law, and had recently been featured in South Florida Business Journal as one of the region's rising legal stars. Friends described her as magnetic, someone who could light up a room with her infectious laugh and quick wit. She drove a white Mercedes convertible, lived in a stunning waterfront condo, and seemed to be living the dream. But on the morning of March 15, 2019, that dream became a nightmare. Kelly's assistant, Mariana Voss, arrived at the law office at 8:30 a.m. to find Kelly's parking spot empty. This was unusual. Kelly was habitually early, often arriving before 7 a.m. to review case files with her morning coffee. Mariana called Kelly's cell phone. No answer. She tried again at 9 a.m., then 10 a.m. By noon, with 2 client meetings missed and Kelly still unreachable, Mariana's concern turned to alarm. She called Kelly's emergency contact, her younger sister, Rachel Coppola, who immediately drove to Kelly's condo. What Rachel found when she used her spare key to enter would haunt her forever. Kelly lay in her bedroom, face down on the carpet beside her bed. She was wearing pajamas. The room showed no signs of forced entry, no signs of struggle. But Kelly was unmistakably dead, and the scene was disturbingly staged. Her body had been positioned carefully, almost reverently, and on her nightstand sat a single white lily in a glass vase, a flower Kelly had never kept in her home. Rachel, screaming, stumbled backward and called 911. Detective Marcus Holloway of the Boca Raton Police Department arrived at 1:47 p.m. A 20-year veteran of homicide investigations, Holloway had seen his share of crime scenes, but something about this one felt different, too clean, too deliberate. The medical examiner's preliminary assessment suggested Kelly had been dead for approximately 72 hours, placing her death around midnight on March 12th. But the cause of death wasn't immediately apparent. There were no visible wounds, no signs of trauma. Kelly's body showed no defensive injuries, no broken nails, no bruising consistent with a fight. The toxicology screen would take weeks, but Holloway's instincts told him this was poison. What made the scene particularly unnerving was its presentation. Kelly's laptop sat open on her desk, powered on, displaying an email draft she'd never finished sending. Her phone was on the nightstand, fully charged, unlocked. Nothing appeared to be missing. Her jewelry box was untouched. Her wallet still contained $300 in cash and all her credit cards. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. Then Detective Sarah Chen, Holloway's partner, found something in the home office. Tucked beneath a stack of legal briefs was a manila folder Kelly's colleagues would later confirm she'd never seen before. Inside were those blueprints, detailed architectural drawings of Kelly's own condo, dated just 1 week before her death. Someone had drawn precise measurements of every room, marked the locations of windows and doors, and circled Kelly's bedroom with that ominous red ink. Handwritten notes in the margins included timestamps: 10:30 p.m., lights off main bedroom; 6:45 a.m., departs for office, usually alone Tuesday and Thursday evenings. Someone had been watching Kelly, studying her, planning. In any murder investigation, detectives start with the inner circle, and Kelly's inner circle immediately pointed them toward one person, her ex-husband, Brandon Price. Kelly and Brandon had met 7 years earlier at a charity gala in Miami. Brandon was a commercial architect, charming and successful, with his own firm specializing in luxury resort design. Friends described their courtship as whirlwind. They were engaged within 6 months and married within a year. But the fairy tale crumbled quickly. According to divorce records, Kelly filed for dissolution of marriage in 2017, citing irreconcilable differences. But court documents told a darker story. Kelly had obtained a temporary restraining order against Brandon, claiming he'd become increasingly controlling and verbally abusive. She alleged that Brandon had installed tracking software on her phone, showed up unannounced at her office, and made threatening comments when she tried to establish boundaries. The divorce had been contentious and expensive. Brandon fought Kelly on every asset, every piece of furniture, every shared bank account. The proceedings dragged on for 18 months. When the final decree was issued in February 2018, Kelly was awarded the condo, her law practice, and significant spousal support payments due to the disparity in their incomes during the marriage. Brandon was ordered to pay Kelly $15,000 monthly for 3 years. According to friends, Brandon never accepted the divorce. He'd sent Kelly dozens of emails, some pleading for reconciliation, others angry and accusatory. Kelly had saved them all, creating a digital trail that would prove crucial. In one particularly chilling message from January 2019, just 2 months before Kelly's death, Brandon wrote, "You think you've won, but you haven't. You'll see. I always finish what I start, Kelly always." Detective Holloway brought Brandon in for questioning on March 16th, less than 24 hours after Kelly's body was discovered. Brandon Price sat across from Holloway and Chen in interview room B, a windowless space with grey walls and fluorescent lighting that made everyone look slightly ill. Brandon was 41, tall and lean, with prematurely greying hair styled impeccably. He wore expensive jeans and a designer button-down shirt. He looked tired but composed. "I already told the officer who called me. I haven't seen Kelly in over a year," Brandon said before the detectives even asked a question. "Whatever happened to her? I had nothing to do with it." Holloway leaned back in his chair. "We haven't told you what happened to her." Brandon blinked. Her sister said, "I assumed." "Where were you on the night of March 12th? Chen asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Brandon's jaw tightened. "Home, alone. Working on project proposals." "Anyone who can verify that." "No, I live alone. I work alone most evenings." His voice carried an edge of frustration. "Look, I know how this looks. Ex-husband, ugly divorce. I'm the obvious suspect. But I didn't hurt Kelly. Despite everything, I cared about her." Chen slid a photograph across the table, the blueprints found in Kelly's condo. "Do you recognize this?" Brandon's face drained of color. He stared at the image for a long moment, his hands gripping the edge of the table. That's my work, my handwriting, but I don't understand. How did you—" "These were found in Kelly's home office. Your blueprints, your handwriting, your surveillance notes about her schedule." Holloway's voice was steel. "You want to explain that?" Brandon shook his head rapidly. No, this is wrong. I drew plans of her condo years ago when we were married. We talked about renovating, maybe adding a home office expansion. But I never— Those notes. I didn't write those notes. Someone setting me up." "Setting you up?" Chen's skepticism was palpable. "Who would do that?" "I don't know, but I'm telling you, I didn't kill Kelly." Brandon's composure was cracking. "Yes, I drew those blueprints. Yes, that's my handwriting on the architectural notes. But those surveillance details, the timestamps, that's not me. Someone took my old plans and added that information to frame me." Holloway watched Brandon carefully. The man was either an excellent actor or genuinely terrified. "We're going to need your phone, your computer, and a sample of your handwriting. We're also going to need you to not leave town." Brandon nodded, swallowing hard. "Am I under arrest?" "Not yet," Holloway said, but stay available. While Holloway and Chen worked Brandon as their primary suspect, the forensics team was uncovering a digital puzzle that didn't quite fit. Kelly's laptop revealed several concerning patterns in the weeks before her death. Tech specialist James Wu discovered that Kelly had been receiving anonymous emails through a throwaway account. The messages were cryptic and threatening. "You took everything from me. You'll pay for what you did. Watch your back." The emails had been sent from public Wi-Fi locations, coffee shops, libraries, a hotel lobby in downtown Boca Raton. Impossible to trace definitively. But here's what made Wu's job interesting. The metadata on those architectural blueprints didn't match Brandon's computer. The file had been created on Brandon's system, his software, his digital signature embedded in the document properties, but it had been modified on a different computer entirely just days before Kelly's death. Someone had accessed Brandon's files, copied the original blueprints, and added the surveillance notes on a separate device. Wu dug deeper into Kelly's email, looking for anything unusual. He found a series of messages between Kelly and her law partner, David Reeves, discussing a complicated case they were handling. The case involved a multi-million-dollar commercial property dispute. One of the parties was claiming fraud in the sale of a resort development. The name of the plaintiff caught Wu's attention, Meridian Properties, LLC. The name of Meridian Properties' majority owner, Christine Vega. And Christine Vega's occupation. She was an interior designer who had worked with Brandon Price's architectural firm on multiple projects. Detective Chen ran Christine Vega's name through their databases and discovered a woman with no criminal record, excellent credit, and a seemingly spotless reputation in South Florida's design community. She was 38, divorced, with a teenage daughter. She ran a successful interior design business that catered to high-end clients, often collaborating with architects on luxury residential and commercial projects. Christine had worked with Brandon's firm on at least 7 projects over the past 5 years. Phone records showed they'd been in contact regularly, dozens of calls, many lasting 20 minutes or more. Text messages revealed a professional relationship that seemed friendly, even warm. But here's where things got interesting. Meridian Properties was suing one of Kelly Coppola's clients for $12 million. Kelly was the lead attorney defending against the fraud allegations, and according to case files, Kelly was winning. She'd uncovered evidence that Meridian Properties had misrepresented the property's value and condition, and the judge was likely to rule in Kelly's client's favor. Meridian stood to lose not just the lawsuit, but potentially face criminal fraud charges. If Meridian lost, Christine Vega would be financially ruined. Chen brought Christine in for questioning on March 20th, 4 days into the investigation. Unlike Brandon's nervous energy, Christine projected calm confidence. "I heard about Kelly," Christine said as she sat down, crossing her legs elegantly. "Tragic, truly tragic." "You knew her?" Chen asked. "Not personally." "I knew of her. She was representing the opposing party in a lawsuit against my company." Christine's voice was measured, practiced, but I certainly had no ill will toward her. "That's what lawyers are for, to handle disputes professionally. You stood to lose a lot of money if you lost that case." Christine smiled thinly. "I still stand to lose a lot of money. Kelly's death doesn't change the facts of the case. Her law partner will take over. The lawsuit continues." Holloway, observing from the corner, spoke up. "Well, tell us about your relationship with Brandon Price." Something flickered across Christine's face, so quick that if Holloway hadn't been watching carefully, he would have missed it. "Brandon and I have worked together professionally. He's an excellent architect. How often do you communicate with him?" "Frequently, when we have active projects together." Christine shifted slightly in her seat. "Why? What does Brandon have to do with Kelly's death?" "We're exploring all connections," Chen said smoothly. "When was the last time you saw Brandon?" Christine paused, thinking, 2 weeks ago, maybe. We had a project meeting about a restaurant redesign in Delray Beach. And when was the last time you communicated with him? I'd have to check my phone records. Christine's composure was intact, but her fingers tapped lightly against her purse. Detective, am I a suspect in something? Should you be? Holloway countered. No, absolutely not. I had no reason to harm Kelly Coppola. Yes, we were on opposite sides of a lawsuit, but that's business. I'm not a murderer. She stood up. Unless you're charging me with something, I'd like to leave now. They let her go, but Holloway and Chen both knew they'd struck a nerve. 2 weeks into the investigation, the toxicology report finally came back from the lab. Kelly Coppola had died from acute digitalis poisoning. Digitalis, extracted from foxglove plants, is a cardiac glycoside that in therapeutic doses treats heart conditions, but in high doses causes fatal cardiac arrhythmia. Kelly had ingested approximately 30 times the therapeutic dose, enough to kill her within hours. The poison had been administered in liquid form, mixed into a bottle of kombucha found in Kelly's refrigerator. The bottle was 3/4 empty. Kelly had been drinking it over several days, ingesting small amounts of poison each time, until the cumulative effect triggered fatal heart failure. The bottle had been purchased from a local health food store. Security footage showed Kelly buying it herself a week before her death. So how did the poison get into it? Detective Wu examined Kelly's door locks and security system. There was no evidence of forced entry, but Kelly's building used an electronic keycard system. Access logs showed that Kelly's door had been opened 3 times in the week before her death, when Kelly herself was confirmed to be elsewhere, at work, at a restaurant with friends, at a yoga class. Someone had a copy of Kelly's key card. The building's security manager provided Chen with a list of everyone who'd had access to program or duplicate key cards. The list included building management, maintenance staff, and, interestingly, a record from 11 months earlier when Kelly had requested a duplicate key card for temporary guest access. The name Kelly had listed for that guest access: Brandon Price. This was during a brief period after the divorce when they'd attempted reconciliation. It hadn't worked out, and according to Kelly's testimony in later restraining order hearings, Brandon had refused to return the key card. Holloway and Chen executed a search warrant on Brandon's home on April 2nd. They found the key card hidden in a drawer in his home office, wrapped in a rubber band with 2 other access cards for buildings where Brandon had clients. They also found something else: a half-empty bottle of cardiac medication containing digitalis, prescribed to Brandon's late father, who died from heart disease 3 years earlier. Brandon Price was arrested on April 3, 2019, and charged with first-degree murder. The evidence seemed overwhelming. His blueprints with surveillance notes found in Kelly's home, his access card to her building, the digitalis from his deceased father's medication, his motive of financial loss and anger over the divorce, his threatening emails. Brandon maintained his innocence from his holding cell, repeating that he was being framed. His attorney, Samuel Berkowitz, filed motion after motion, arguing that the evidence was circumstantial and that someone had deliberately planted it to implicate Brandon. But prosecutors felt confident. They had means, motive, and opportunity. Brandon had the architectural knowledge to create those blueprints, the key card to access Kelly's condo, and the poison to kill her. He'd threatened her repeatedly in emails. He'd lost a bitter divorce and was paying crippling spousal support. The case seemed closed until Detective Holloway found the phone records. Holloway had been bothered by something Christine Vega said in her interview. She claimed she communicated with Brandon frequently about professional projects, but when Holloway subpoenaed both of their phone records, he found something that made his stomach drop. Brandon and Christine had been communicating far more than professionally. They'd exchanged over 400 text messages in the 3 months before Kelly's death. Most messages had been deleted from both phones, but cell phone providers keep records of message frequency, timestamps, and general metadata. The pattern was revealing: clusters of messages late at night, long phone calls when Brandon claimed to be working alone, and a significant spike in communication in the 2 weeks before Kelly's murder. Holloway obtained a search warrant to recover deleted messages from both phones. The forensic recovery process took 2 weeks, but what emerged was a conspiracy more twisted than anyone had anticipated. Brandon and Christine weren't just professional colleagues, they were lovers. The relationship had begun 2 years earlier, while Brandon was still married to Kelly, when Christine hired Brandon's firm for a resort redesign project. The affair was the real reason Kelly had filed for divorce. She'd discovered text messages between them, but it was more than an affair. The recovered messages revealed that Christine was facing bankruptcy if she lost the Meridian Properties lawsuit. She was desperate, and she'd convinced Brandon that Kelly was the source of all their problems. "She's destroying both of us," Christine had texted Brandon on February 15th. "You're paying her $15,000 a month you don't have. I'm about to lose everything because of her legal maneuvering. We could both be free if she just wasn't a problem anymore." Brandon's response: "What are you suggesting?" Christine: "I'm suggesting we're smarter than everyone else. You know buildings, I know people. Together, we could solve this." The messages became more explicit. Christine researched poisons, specifically cardiac glycosides that could mimic natural heart failure. She'd visited 3 different pharmacies to gather information about digitalis. Brandon had accessed Kelly's condo using his old keycard to plant the poisoned kombucha, but he'd done it on Christine's instruction, following her plan. The blueprints were part of an elaborate frame. Christine had suggested Brandon create them on his own computer, then she'd added the surveillance notes on a separate device. The plan was that if the murder were ever discovered as homicide rather than natural causes, the evidence would point to Brandon as a jealous ex-husband who'd acted alone. Christine would remain hidden, unsuspected, free to continue her life while Brandon took the fall. But Christine had made a critical mistake. She'd gotten greedy. Detective Chen returned to Kelly's condo for another walkthrough, this time with the new context of Christine's involvement. That white lily on Kelly's nightstand, the detail that had seemed like a signature, almost romantic in its macabre staging, suddenly made sense. Chen contacted Kelly's sister, Rachel. "Did Kelly like lilies?" "No," Rachel said. "She actually hated them. She said they reminded her of funerals. She never kept them in the house." Chen ran a credit card trace on Christine Vega. 3 days before Kelly's death, Christine had purchased flowers from a boutique florist in Boca Raton. The receipt specified 1 white lily, arranged in a glass vase. Why would Christine leave that lily? Psychological profilers the department consulted suggested it was a need for recognition, a signature that showed the murder wasn't random, wasn't simple. Christine wanted to mark her work, to feel the satisfaction of having executed a perfect plan. She couldn't resist adding that personal touch, that artistic flourish that said, "I did this." It was the arrogance of someone who believed they were smarter than everyone else. And it was the detail that would destroy her. On April 20th, 2019, Christine Vega was arrested at her office. The evidence was now overwhelming. The deleted text messages outlining the murder conspiracy, the florist receipt for the lily, financial records showing her desperate situation with the Meridian lawsuit, phone records placing her near Kelly's condo the day the poisoned kombucha was planted. In interrogation, Christine initially maintained complete denial. She sat across from Holloway and Chen, her designer clothes and perfect makeup a stark contrast to the harsh reality of her situation. "This is absurd," she said. "Brandon and I are friends, colleagues, nothing more." Holloway slid printouts of the recovered text messages across the table. Christine's eyes scanned them, and for the first time, her composure cracked. Her hand trembled as she reached for the papers. These could be interpreted many ways," she tried. "We were frustrated. Venting. People say things they don't mean." We could solve this problem permanently. Chen read from one message. Digitalis is undetectable in kombucha's fermented flavor profile. That's pretty specific for venting. Christine closed her eyes. When she opened them, something had changed. The mask of innocence had fallen away, replaced by cold calculation. I want to make a deal. Holloway leaned back. We're listening. Brandon planned everything, Christine said, her voice now sharp, businesslike. I tried to talk him out of it. I was terrified. He said if I didn't help him, he'd make sure I lost everything, my business, my reputation, my daughter. He manipulated me into going along with his plan. That's not what the messages show, Chen said flatly. And then the messages are incomplete. You don't have the full context. You don't know what he threatened to do to me if I refused. Christine's eyes filled with calculated tears. I was his victim too. He used me. It was a last-ditch effort to shift blame, to play victim, but the evidence was too clear, the timeline too precise. Christine had been the architect of the murder plot, and Brandon, angry, hurt, financially devastated, had been her willing accomplice. When Brandon's attorney learned about Christine's arrest and her attempt to blame everything on his client, he made a calculated decision. He approached prosecutors with an offer. Brandon would testify against Christine in exchange for a plea deal. Second-degree murder instead of first-degree possibility of parole after 25 years instead of life without parole. In his proffer session, Brandon laid out the entire conspiracy in devastating detail. Yes, he'd been angry about the divorce. Yes, he'd felt financially crushed by the spousal support payments. Yes, he'd been having an affair with Christine. But the murder itself had been Christine's idea, her plan, her obsession. She was losing everything because of the lawsuit, Brandon told prosecutors. She kept saying Kelly was going to destroy her, that Kelly was vicious and wouldn't stop until Christine was homeless. She asked me one night if I ever fantasized about Kelly just disappearing. I said something stupid, something like all the time. And Christine, she took that and ran with it. According to Brandon, Christine had researched everything, the poison, the delivery method, the timing. She'd suggested he use his old keycard to access Kelly's condo. She'd even suggested framing himself subtly, creating evidence that would point to him as a suspect who'd later be cleared due to insufficient evidence, which would prevent double jeopardy if anyone ever discovered the truth. She said she'd learned from true crime documentaries, Brandon said, his voice hollow. She said the smartest killers always have the police briefly suspect them, then clear them, because then they can never be charged again. She was going to discover evidence that I couldn't have done it. She had this whole elaborate plan. But Christine had underestimated how thoroughly investigators would pursue the case. She'd assumed Kelly's death would be ruled natural causes. Heart failure, in an otherwise healthy woman, would be tragic, but not uncommon. The digitalis should have been undetectable without specific testing. The autopsy should have been routine. What she hadn't counted on was Detective Holloway's instincts, the careful scene analysis and the meticulous toxicology screening that caught the poison. The state of Florida v. Christine Vega began on November 4th, 2019. The prosecution, led by Assistant State Attorney Maria Gonzalez, methodically presented their case. The motive, financial ruin from the pending lawsuit. The means, access through Brandon, knowledge of poisons, and the opportunity, coordination with Brandon to access Kelly's home and plant the poisoned kombucha. Brandon testified for 3 days, describing in excruciating detail how Christine had manipulated him, how she'd outlined the plan, how she'd made it seem like they were partners saving each other when really she was setting him up to take the fall alone. The defense, led by prominent criminal attorney Robert Ashford, tried to paint Christine as Brandon's victim, a successful businesswoman manipulated by a vengeful ex-husband. But the evidence was overwhelming. The text messages showed Christine initiating the planning. The flower receipt placed her at the scene. Financial experts testified about her desperate financial situation. The white lily became a central symbol in the trial. Prosecutors argued it represented Christine's need for recognition, her artistic signature on what she considered a perfect crime. Defense attorneys claimed it proved nothing. Perhaps Brandon had left it himself, another attempt to frame Christine, but Rachel Coppola's testimony was devastating. She described her sister's hatred of lilies, how Kelly had refused to have them at their mother's funeral because they depressed her. Kelly would never have put a lily in her own bedroom. Someone else had staged that detail. The forensic evidence was equally damning. Analysts testified that the handwritten surveillance notes on the blueprints matched neither Brandon's handwriting nor any exemplars from his computer or notebooks. But they did match samples from Christine's personal journals, which detectives had seized during their search of her home. She'd tried to disguise her handwriting, but distinctive letter formations gave her away. Christine's own testimony didn't help her case. On the stand, she appeared cold, calculating, more angry about being caught than remorseful about Kelly's death. When Gonzalez asked if she felt any guilt about taking a life, Christine responded, "I didn't take anything. Kelly took from me my security, my business, my peace of mind. I was defending myself." It was exactly the wrong thing to say. The jury's faces reflected their horror. After deliberating for 2 days, the jury returned on December 3, 2019. The courtroom was packed. Kelly's family, friends, colleagues, reporters, and the merely curious. Christine sat at the defense table, her face a mask. "Has the jury reached a verdict?" Judge Patricia Hartwell asked. "We have, Your Honor," the foreperson said, standing. "On the charge of murder in the first degree, how do you find?" "We find the defendant, Christine Marie Vega, guilty." The courtroom erupted. Rachel Coppola collapsed into her husband's arms, sobbing. Kelly's law partner, David Reeves, closed his eyes, exhaling deeply. Christine remained motionless, staring straight ahead. "On the charge of conspiracy to commit murder, how do you find guilty?" Christine's daughter, 17-year-old Emma, fled the courtroom crying. Judge Hartwell scheduled sentencing for January 2020, then dismissed the jury with thanks for their service. As deputies led Christine from the courtroom in handcuffs, she finally showed emotion, not remorse, but rage. She turned back toward the gallery where Kelly's family sat. "She wasn't innocent," Christine shouted, her face contorted. "She destroyed people for a living. She destroyed me." "I'm not the villain here!" Deputies restrained her, pulling her through the door. Her voice echoed down the hallway. "I'm not the villain!" But the jury had decided otherwise. Christine Vega, the woman who'd planned a murder with architectural precision, who'd left a white lily as her signature, who'd tried to frame her lover for a crime they'd committed together, had been convicted. Brandon Price, for his cooperation, received a sentence of 25 years to life. Christine would face sentencing in the new year, likely receiving life without possibility of parole. The blueprints that had been meant to create something beautiful, architectural plans for a home renovation, had instead become the framework for murder. And in the end, both the architect and the designer had been caught by their own arrogance, their belief that they were smarter than everyone else, their certainty that they could commit the perfect crime. Kelly Coppola's life had ended in her bedroom, poisoned by 2 people who believed she stood between them and happiness. But through meticulous investigation, digital forensics, and good old-fashioned detective work, justice had found its way through the lies, the manipulation, and the carefully constructed false narratives. The case was closed. The verdict was in. Kelly's family could finally begin to grieve without the torture of uncertainty, and 2 killers would spend the rest of their lives paying for their crime, a murder so carefully planned it almost worked.